Hey everybody, Josh Sigurdson of World Alternative Media here, and we're joined by Tim Picciott, the Liberty Advisor, certified financial planner. You could check the links below for information on him and how you can get involved. There's a lot we need to go into today because we're watching the New World Order be built right before our eyes, and basically a playbook written for where we are heading in the coming months and years. And this year, 2024, has been obviously pretty insane already. There's much more to come as BRICS has announced that they're releasing their new world reserve currency system this year at their summit. And of course, we are entering into the pandemic treaty. We're entering into all these different things, CBDCs across the board, and we're gonna get into that and much more today. One story I have up from Zero Hedge says, "Brothers forever." Putin, Xi agree that deepened ties project stability against West's unilateral hegemony. So they have recently met, as of today, when I'm speaking right now. I think this video comes out tomorrow. They met and they had a very symbolic visit. People carrying suitcases as literally just a symbol of their work together on moving the New World Order forward. And look, people will say, well, Putin isn't that bad. People are not understanding the psyop here. Every government at play here is working together, including the West committing suicide. We have this out of RT. It says BRICS should be ready for dollar collapse. Russian IMF representative says the international group could create an alternative currency based on their national legal tenders, according to Alexei Mosin. So there's a lot of talk about this. All the while, I mean, we have everyone's leaving the dollar. Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, Egypt. I mean, it's getting crazy. And Zimbabwe has launched a gold currency to replace the dollar. So, by the way, if you don't remember, historically, Zimbabwe, when they had hyperinflation, they moved to a currency based on the US dollar. Now, well, they've seen the circumstances around that. It hasn't worked out well for them, and they owe the IMF a bunch of money, and they're just like, okay, we're launching a gold currency to replace the dollar. So everyone is turning their backs on the dollar as the West collapses, and it's all by design. All the while, we have the move into CBDCs, and we have this from reclaimthenet.org. It says WEF panelist says COVID response made people more receptive to central bank digital currencies. So they're basically mocking us that they've utilized all these things to push us into the next step in the global agenda, which will be the monetary system and will mean an end to what we know as the West. So we're going to go into this and much more today, my friends. Before we do, I urge you to check those links below. We have a link for the libertyadvisorshow.com as well as the libertyadvisor.com. That's advisor with an OR, just to be clear. And if you go there, you can get a free initial consultation. You could go and get work done with Tim Picciott if you are worried about where the dollar is going, if you're worried about your bank account and where the value of your money stands in, say, 1 year, 5 years, 10 years, though things are moving fast. So I definitely consider looking into that now. That link is in the description, and I highly recommend you sign up as a client with Tim because he's been speaking about this stuff for many, many years and has been bang on here on this channel and in his own work outside of this channel for many, many years. So that's in the description, the libertyadvisor.com and the libertyadvisorshow.com. Make sure to check that out. Also, if you guys aren't prepared at this point, I don't know what to tell you guys, but nonetheless, I'm still going to throw it out there because I'm hoping someone's listening that wants to take charge of their life and be prepared going forward so that they don't end up in food ration lines for Bill Gates mystery food. So I urge people to go and check out heavensharvest.com for long-term storable foods that are non-GMO. There's organic kits, heirloom seeds, water filtration and storage, and books on how to get started. Use code WAM, W-A-M, and you get 5% off as well as free shipping to the United States. Don't wait until it's too late. Food is the original currency of the world, and we need to take this very seriously. It's an investment, if anything, that keeps you alive versus what they're planning with rations and CBDCs and carbon credits and social credits and the like. So anyway, let's get into this. So Tim, we're seeing Xi Jinping and Putin meet up. We've seen this many times before, but there seems to be a lot of symbology around this as we see the psyop that's leading to this scripted World War III situation. There is a very obvious shift culturally, monetarily, in every single way, militarily, from the West to the East. And with BRICS saying they're going to launch this new world reserve currency system this year, what do you think is happening behind closed doors here with, Russia, China, India, Brazil, South Africa, Egypt, Saudi Arabia? I mean, we have the countries that literally support the dollar, leaving the dollar in this way. What do you think is happening?
Thanks, Josh. So I think what's happening is, I mean, people and by people in countries can see the writing on the wall, and they can see that, basically that the U.S. is in a position where it's weaponizing its role as the world reserve currency holder, and no one wants to be subject to the whims of, the one bully on the block. And that's not to say that, that these other countries are better or anything like that, but if you take a look at Klaus Schwab's book, The Great Reset, I think it's somewhere between like pages 72 to 75. It's called The Fate of the US Dollar. And one of those sections, it lists different things that would be a precursor to the dollar losing reserve status. And the big one was if the US were to ever weaponize the dollar. Well, obviously, that if has already come to fruition
Yeah.
with the US kicking Russia off the SWIFT system. And I think historians will. Now, obviously, historians, the victors get to write the history, but I think a lot of people will signify that as being sort of the first major death blow to the dollar is when the U.S. kicked Russia off the SWIFT system. So the other countries around the world, the 95% of the population that's not Americans, can see that they don't want to be subject to the whims of whatever someone in Washington, D.C. wants to. And I don't think it's a crazy tinfoil hat conspiracy theory to think that if Russia and China are trading amongst each other, why are they going to want to use US dollars to have an unnecessary middleman that enriches Americans at the expense of everyone else worldwide? And so if you're the rest of the world, they basically have given the US all this metaphorical rope to go hang ourselves with. And that's exactly what's being done. But it does sadden me because, you see all these, younger kids and Gen Z and whatever. And obviously, they were taught by boomers and people that don't know anything about economics. Oh, and speaking of people that don't know anything about economics, for anyone who saw Biden's chief economic advisor, like Jared Bernstein, it's almost like if somebody is like, you're not like you're writing notes in school and people, I guess, used to do that. You're not paying attention to the teacher and the teacher calls on you. And this guy had zero clue what goes on in terms of how money comes into creation. But I think ultimately, maybe he does know, but he didn't want to say it because if he said it, then it would look like too much of a screw job. Because at its heart, at the very heart, what everybody needs to understand is that for a dollar bill to come into existence, it doesn't have to be, but in this current screw job system that we're in right now, it's borrowed into existence. So you have a Federal Reserve, it's 12-member banks who never had the money to begin with, who then printed it up out of thin air, lent it to the U.S. at interest. And so, then they get to take money that they never really had. That now they're getting interest income off of that, and they get to buy up actual real assets, which is why Thomas Jefferson said, if you ever allow a private central bank to issue the currency and credit of this nation, first by inflation, then by deflation, will be homeless on the continent our forefathers conquered. And this is a worldwide phenomenon that's going on right now, where these bankers have this worldwide screw job of their debt-based usury system all around the world. And that is the thing that people need to understand because,
well, I think a lot of people, sorry to interrupt him, but just regarding Biden's advisors and all these people that are in charge of the financial system, what people need to realize is that these academics don't know what they're talking about. I mean, we just had Sheila Jackson Lee at the eclipse the other day, who graduated from Yale, saying that the moon was made of gas. And I mean, we have really stupid people in power. This is literally idiocracy. But sorry, continue on with where you're going.
I guess this is not Hank Johnson, who is worried that if there's too many troops on, I forgot if it was like Guam, that the island of Guam would tip over. I think
he thinks
Guam,
islands float, and he was a guy who replaced Representative Cynthia McKinney, by the way, who's a friend of our channel. But just absolute insanity.
That's crazy. Yeah. So, I mean, it's so easy for the youth to be, fall into all these politicians like Bernie Sanders and all these, people want to be Santa Claus that want to give them a bunch of free stuff. But what people like Dr. Ron Paul was promising was freedom. And so, a lot of these people that wanted, the so-called free stuff, we know that nothing is ever free. They're going to see, exactly how expensive all this free stuff is by now these inflation rates going out of control. Now, there was some news yesterday that Inflation, food price inflation was only 1%. Yeah, give me a break. No one believes that. And that last month, food prices actually fell for the first time in 12 months. Yeah, no one believes that. So they can rig these numbers. They are rigging these numbers. And, I wrote a whole book on this called How It's Rigged in 2015. And so essentially, right now, they are rigging all these different inflationary numbers. Like you used to have steak, and now you're eating hot dogs. They're putting the price of hot dog. Or you had a phone that cost $500, now your new phone costs $1,000. We'll just say, oh well, since the processor is 10 times better, and the camera is way better, the zoom and this and that. Actually, even though it costs 100% more, because of its features, you're actually a better value, and so it's actually now it's a deflation, and they call that a hedonic adjustment. We can go on all day about ways to do
Well,
this. And so
Tim,
when they
I really feel like where we're going with this global order, which is based on the monetary system, people think it's all military, people think it's all pharma, all those things are related to it and correlated with it. But the financial system is really how you wield power around the world. And this BRICS currency just seems a lot like special drawing rights for the East, like a basket of currencies that are able to vote on different things. And, as we've seen in recent days, the IMF has allowed many countries to be paid their debts in Chinese yuan. So, I mean, this is already shifting in this direction. We have a weakened culture, demoralized culture. As Orwell said, if you want to destroy a civilization, it has to come from within, and it will start with the demoralization of the people. They will not respect themselves. They will not respect their society anymore, and it will collapse and it'll be weakened. And that's how you shift to the next. And that's what we're witnessing now, militarily, culturally, and of course, monetarily. So, with this move into the BRICS world reserve currency system, which is this year, people don't realize how fast moving this is. People will say, oh, well, your chicken little sky's falling. For years, I've been saying this would happen because it doesn't happen overnight. It's a slow roll. You don't wake up tomorrow and the dollar's gone. It happens over a period of time. But with that said, everything is matched up with what we've been talking about for years. And now we are actually at the year when this happens. And I hope I'm wrong, but I know I'm not. In 8 or 9 months, are people going to apologize to me when they see, oh yeah, this has gone through? Because people always say, well, the West would never allow that to happen. It's a controlled demolition like Building 7, my friends. It is absolutely by the script, by the hand of the West. They're committing suicide. They've literally made that rope. They've tied it around that post. They put their neck in it. And then people are going to say, oh no, they'll never allow that to happen. Meanwhile, their hand is on the switch. It's absurd. So anyway, moving into this new world order that's happening, I talked about how Zimbabwe wants to leave the dollar to back their currency with gold. We see this in many places, but we also see much of Africa going into the digital ID system. Australia just went full-fledged into the digital ID system as of today, as I speak. And Canada has it. Many other countries, Sierra Leone, you can't have a job, you can't get a car, you can't have a home, you can't immigrate, you can't do anything, have a bank account without a digital ID. Now we have the WEF speaker saying that they utilize COVID in order to desensitize people essentially to a CBDC. He said it was good for bringing in a CBDC. Talk a little bit about how, because people keep saying BRICS, it's going to be a gold-backed currency. We'll never see the gold. We'll never see the actual amount. We'll just see the IOUs on a digital platform. How you see a world, Tim, where this new world reserve currency system that's supposed to save the day as a dollar crashes, how we're going to see that laid out, what that means, how that will affect the average person who has money in the bank.
Well, I mean, the money in the bank is basically going to be, going broke safely. And so, basically what you should be doing is, trying to convert that into things that you think are at least going to hold on to its purchasing power. And so, I mean, what I'm doing over here is, I probably put in like 40, 50 different citrus trees over the past, 3 or 4 months. So, once the frost was over, putting in a greenhouse, getting the food forest and the chickens and trying to make myself as resilient to not have to go and accept their mark as much as we possibly could be. Now, this whole scamdemic, plandemic, right from the very get-go, was about trying to get, there's multiple different things they're trying to do, but one of the main things they're trying to do was get a digital currency. And you and I have been talking about CBDCs since before that term even existed, talking about, you were talking about the cashless society, you and John Snyson from, 2014, 2015.
And correlating it with the World Economic Forum. We even called it a big reset. We didn't call it the Great Reset. This is before they came out with the word the Great Reset, but we called it the Big Reset. We have videos from 2014 on that, which by the way, it was just luck, but it's always a reset. So we knew one way or another it was going to be something
Yeah, I
like
think I
that.
refer to it as there has to be a major reset. So I mean, what you want to parse together the words, but I mean,
Yeah.
3 years ago, I won a rant off random. When Aaron and Kingsley, wanted me up there at Float to do a rant off, and I'm like, you know what, I'll do one on CBDCs. No one cared at all about CBDCs 3 years ago, and
Yeah.
then gave that presentation that you posted on your channel about the digital dictatorship. And a lot of those slides were from the bad guys. It wasn't a slide that Tim Picciott created. It was some of these were slides that you've all Noah Harari created about digital dictatorships and
Yep.
hacking biology. And there was bills, I think like March 22nd, 2020 about, Banking for All Act and Digital Inclusivity Act. And, there's other ones in June, the very first CARES Act, where a lot of people got the $1,200, so-called stimulus free money. We know it's not free, but, that $1,200, the first draft of that legislation, the Maxine Waters draft, was to actually have a digital dollar. So that was a trial balloon. And since, you and I were some of the only people that complained on it, and, that trial balloon is going forward. They obviously had trial balloons in, in China, where they already have this underway. And they were able to get people to sell out in China for literally the opportunity to win free laundry. And so for the opportunity to win free laundry, they had like 30 million people sign up for this. And this was like 4 years ago. So by now, obviously that number is dramatically higher, but that's the goal. Is they want to, we have Augustus Carstens, or Gustin Carstens, the 400-pound fat slob that runs the Bank of International Settlements. And for those of you who don't know, that is its own country in outside of Basel, Switzerland, and they call it the Tower of Basel. And there's a whole book on it called the Tower of Basel.
Yeah,
And
I've been
so,
there at their door trying to get in on video before. We did a report several years ago. And by the way, if you walk around that building, there's stickers everywhere that say use gold. There's Bitcoin stickers, there's Monero stickers. It's pretty interesting.
yeah, and so they want to get to this point where they have all. I mean, okay. The point was, you had Augustus Carstens who said, how evil it is that people could have $100 bill or $1,000 peso and they can't track it, but with CBDC, we'll now have the technology to enforce that, and they can, willy-nilly go and shut you down. And so people are going to want to have non-debt based money. Even Ray Dalio, one of the largest hedge fund, I think he runs the largest hedge fund in the world over at Bridgeport, had something on his LinkedIn the other day that said, we need to have non-debt based money, or you need to hold on to non-debt based money. And so that's Ray Dalio saying that. That's not Josh and Tim going ahead and saying that. But this is not, a panic situation. You go and you take a look at, because a lot of people think that the thing to keep them safe is going to be, okay, we'll just go straight to cash. So this is not, if you think the dollar is ultimately going to go down, you don't want to have everything sitting in the dollar. And so that's where I see a lot of people in the Liberty community going wrong. And this is not financial advice. I do have an entire presentation that I've already made. I've got my compliance team looking over this right now. Actually, I've got two of them. One's going to be on for people who got into Bitcoin early, and a lot of advanced strategies they can use as solutions to, basically kind of get their own off-grid food forest, redoubt, and, basically, essentially have the IRS pay for it, long story short, by all the tax cuts and credits that they're going to get. Now, on the other side of the thing, I have the Great Reset Retirement Blueprint, which is a modification of a presentation I've been doing since 2019, where it takes a look at all the factors that can affect someone's retirement and trying to hedge different ways to get ahead of this. And so, you know what? It's the war that we fought in 2008, metaphorically, is not necessarily going to be the way to go fight this going forward, because if it's the money that is the problem, you're not going to save yourself by just hoarding onto dollars. Take a look at what happened in Germany from now past performance, no occasion of future returns, but from 1919 to 1924, their stock market, while priced in the Reichsmark, went up 20 billion%. But then their silver market, or their gold market during that time period, priced in local currency terms that collapsed, went up 1,000,000,000,000% roughly.
Right.
And the silver market went up 10,000,000,000,000% roughly. So that's not saying, oh yeah, Tim said go into silver because it's going to go 10,000,000,000,000%. No, it's about having a real asset when the money implodes. Unless you want to go and trade it in for another BS digital this time will be a completely digital currency, but the plan is to go and trade in the dollar for the next version of the dollar. Just like in Germany, they had the gold mark, then that collapsed into the Ren mark, and then that collapsed into the Reich mark, and then that collapsed into the Deutschmark eventually. And so anyone holding on to cash, anyone holding on to the bonds, they were wiped out 4 different times in like 15, 20 years. Whereas if you're holding on to real assets, and those real assets were then getting repriced, but then, there's different things they could do with that too.
Yeah.
So, it's about getting ahead of it and having, multiple different hedges in place to not get stuck. And then unfortunately, a lot of people that have all their money, in their, 401ks and IRAs, there's going to be, I think a lot of people panicking. They're going to have old school advisors that aren't necessarily going to know what's going on. And by the time they figure it out, it could be too late. And so, you know what? The Chinese symbol for crisis is the same for opportunity. And so I think there is an opportunity to make yourself the least worse off. But, as guys like Doug Casey say, when all this stuff goes down, I mean, you're really trying to be the least worse off. You're not necessarily trying to say, oh, I'm going to get that 1,000,000,000% return. It's like, no, you want to make sure that you and your family can eat, that you guys can survive whatever, fallout it's going to be, because there's going to be multiple stages to these fallouts. But the first big domino, I think, will be the dollar collapse. And then, we get into more spiritual and other things that are happening down the line that's outside the scope of this conversation. But, you've got to be able, I want to stick around to see how the series finale ends. But in order to do that, you got to first make it through the first.
Absolutely. And you mentioned Doug Casey. Love the guy. We need to get him back on the show again soon. It's been like 5 years, 6 years since I've had him on. But he's been speaking about this stuff since the 1960s, 70s, just like our friend G. Edward Griffin. We've been trying to warn as many people as possible so they can put the right solutions forward. People think it's fear mongering. It's not. But I mean, look at what's happening with digital IDs. Look at what's happening with CBDCs. 98% of countries in the world are releasing CBDCs within this year or next. I mean, they're banning private car ownership in many places, or driving private cars in the center of Paris, putting up ULEZ, putting 15-minute cities throughout the UK, bringing in carbon credits.
In Paris this summer.
There's QR codes. I just reported on that in a video that I just posted today, actually. And then there is also QR codes to get in and out of areas in Canada now. And they just deployed social credit on bank accounts with the social credit score on everyone's bank accounts. People don't realize that's actually there now. And of course, on top of that, in Canada, and in America, they kind of they do it in a way with FedNow, as a matter of fact, but not to the same degree. But it will be there because, I mean, they're trying to limit meat consumption in New York and in Chicago and places like that. At the moment, they are going for that initiative. They're going after farmers. Of course, you have this Chinese approach, this technocratic approach that they're pushing forward everywhere. Carbon credits on bank accounts. They banned hate speech. If you say something 10 years ago, you can go to jail now in Canada. You could do this. The same thing could happen in Scotland. 7 years in prison for insulting someone. I mean, it's really getting to that point. And on top of that, I have to point out all the digital IDs throughout Africa, like I did earlier. But the UK, one of the biggest lobbies for the grid in the UK just the other day said, we need to force people to have mandatory smart meters on their home. Now, Tim, I don't know. You probably heard me say this about 1,000 times over the years, that they would force you to use smart meters to tell the government how much gas, electricity, and water you use on a daily basis to be able to dictate your carbon credit score. Well, now they just announced that. So I don't know how many more times I have to be called a conspiracy theorist before people go, wait a second, he's just researching what they say they're going to do, and now they're doing it. So like Tim said, there's solutions to these issues, and there's so many. I mean, there's a million different ways that you can be more secure and free in your life. And that comes from within. You don't hold freedom in your hand. You are the freedom or you're not. Depends how you defend yourself or you don't. So versus this behemoth that we're witnessing, this global government forming and strictly from the monetary system, but spreading out to every other sector, we have to understand that, faith without work is dead. We are given responsibility. It's endowed upon us. We have to do something about that. That's humanity. That's individualism. That's freedom. It's synonymous. And there's so many ways that Tim is doing things in order to make sure he's fine. He's doing things to make sure his clients are fine. Again, link in the description for that. And, food, water, shelter, self-defense. So you're not gathering things for the toughest guy in the block. Gold, silver, in my opinion, not investment advice. Privacy coins, again, something that I'm a big fan of. Again, not investment advice. But these things seem obvious after years and years and years of talking about this. So it's up to everyone out there to actually take that initiative and do something about it. And I wish everyone luck, because you don't want to be on the inside looking out. It's better to be on the outside looking in, knowing what's coming, and preparing yourself so you can get around that, so you don't end up on the inside the cage that they're building. So again, Tim, I appreciate you joining us today. I'm in Macedonia. I'm going over to Kosovo, or as some people call Serbia. I don't care. It depends who you're talking to. I'm not involved in the politics of that war or situation, but I'll be in Kosovo, in Pristina tomorrow, or as I speak, when this video comes up. So bear with me, my friends. I'm getting videos up. I have to cut this a bit shorter than usual, because I don't know how good the internet is, and it's a nightmare posting this on 17 different platforms. But with that said, Tim, I appreciate you joining us. Can you tell everyone where they can go and get involved with you? And of course, just give people your links and where they can follow and support.
Yeah, thanks. So right now I am in the process of updating the website. I've already gone through and had the edits. I'm just waiting for our legal team to actually approve them. But yeah, so the big thing is I've got.
Can you talk a little bit closer to the microphone, Tim?
Yeah, I've got different live webinars I'm going to be hosting. And so for people that are within 5 years of retirement, maybe 5 years into retirement, so what we call that retirement red zone, I have what I think is the blueprint to get you through to retirement, because there's all these different risks that are out there. And so it's a question of how do you manage these risks, and how do you get income, but then how do you also have other investments over here for when, what hits the fan. And so, I believe, what is the premier strategy to do this. I've been talking about it since before the pandemic, and actually on stage at Acapulco presenting on something similar to this in 2019. I've since, refined it a little bit, but, the core of the strategy is still there. And, a lot of people are wanting to talk about what's happening now. In hindsight, I was talking about what was happening ahead of time, having that foresight of what you could do to get yourselves ahead of this. And my very first podcast, for anyone that's interested in, checking out, different work I put out there, you can go to thelibertyadvisorshow.com. Episode 1 in 2016 was on interest rate risk, which is what would happen when the Federal Reserve would eventually have to raise rates, not because they wanted to, but because they had to, and how that would basically collapse the banking system. That's what we saw a year and a half happen ago with all these big banks. But then they pulled a rabbit out of their sleeves with this whole bank term funding program.
Though a few others have fallen in the last couple months, so we're starting to see that kind of curve back in that direction.
Yeah, and even before I had the podcast, right around this time, it was June of 2016. I had a question that made it to Janet Yellen through one of my congressmen, describing that situation and how it would eventually unfold. And she laughed at my scenario and said that it was technically that it was impossible to happen. And then she clarified it and said, actually, you know what? Maybe it could happen, because if things are going so great in the economy that we're forced to raise rates to slow things down, and wouldn't that be such a great problem to have? Well, is it now, Janet? Now that you've got $1 trillion a year in interest, and in every 100 days you've got to print another $1 trillion you don't have. Is that what that was the really good scenario, Janet, of what's going on? But she's rewarded by being the Treasury Secretary, who's going over there in China and just getting laughed at. But you know what? It's not about putting out fear. It's about taking control. And so I have a lot of peace of mind knowing that I've done the things for me and my family and my community. Because everything we're growing over here is not for me. I don't need to be doing all this stuff for me. But it's then going and giving away to others who are less fortunate, or maybe who didn't plan. But you know what? We need to have several people who are out there being, I guess, the Johnny Appleseed, Paul Revere, to start spreading freedom. Because if they can go and force you to do something that you don't want to do because your family's starving, then they've got you. And so, it starts with having, I think, that food independence, and then starting to go look ahead of, Maslow's hierarchy of needs of, how to protect things higher up the food chain.
Hey, it's better to be a Johnny Appleseed than a William Tell. Apple reference. Anyway, I appreciate you joining us today, Tim. And there's a lot of ways that people can get involved and not just support Tim, but there's the libertyadvisor.com, the libertyadvisorshow.com. There's a bit.ly link in the description, many different ways. And of course, you can find him on Twitter at Advisor Liberty. Make sure it's an OR in advisor. And of course, go follow him there. He's on Rumble, the Liberty Advisor, many other places. So go and find him. And if you want to become a client, that link is in the description. Again, many ways you can get prepared. As I mentioned, heavensharvest.com, long-term storable food that's non-GMO. There's organic kits, heirloom seeds, water filtration and storage, and books on how to get started. Use code WAM, WAM, and you get 5% off, as well as free shipping in the United States. We have many different ways for you to help support yourself. My goodness, mean, I can't go into all of the different ones today, but those links are in the description, and we have a million videos on them. If you don't want mRNA food, there's options below. If you want to get apricot seeds, options below. Code Josh, Josh, over at rncstore.com. So again, the world is a big open oyster, which I'm unfortunately allergic to. Suddenly I have a shellfish allergy. I don't know where that came from, but the world is a big oyster, and there's a lot that you can do with it. And of course, despite all the negativities, there's always positivities, but that comes from you. That comes what you do next, and as a responsible free human being. So you make that determination yourself. I appreciate you joining us today, Tim. And until next time, this is Josh Sigurdson and Tim Picciott signing out from World Alternative Media. Find the truth, be the change.